All right, now that if you watched the first video about how to set up keybinds and potentially using game glass for your games, now you got to figure out where am I going to go test this. So when you first launch into the game, as you see here, one of the more important functions of the game is really the test environments, or the goof around environments, if you will, in Star Marine and Arena Commander. So for flying ships, which we're going to focus on mostly in my series of videos, is going to be around flight and our ground vehicles, some land stuff, but not too much. But we're going to look at the Arena Commander section, which is really important for testing and figuring out what to do and where to go. So if you're initially just testing all these keybinds that you've been messing with, you can go into the single player and you can actually change your map over here to the Dying Star and get a preview of the pyro system that's coming up, as this is one of the visuals that are coming out of that system. But you also have game mode. You can go into fights with Pirate Swarm, Vandal Swarm, and Classic Race and kind of test some stuff out. But initially, since we're just talking about really setting up keybinds and getting those things going, let's go into the free flight mode and see what's up in there. So now we're free flight, we're on single player. We're going to go ahead. You can select or rent your ship here at this point. And by renting, you might have some ability to play with some of the ships that you have. Most of those are loaded in. They've loaded some more in here recently. However, you also have the option to rent ships with rental equipment credits. So you may see that from initially signing up, or if you're a subscriber, you get a certain amount every month. And you can see, I don't use mine a ton. After some initial setups or whatnot, I don't use it a ton up here, and you can see the wallet rental equipment credit has stacked up to almost $500,000 over the course of a few months. But here, I know it takes sometimes, but you can go into ship customization and more or less pick out your ship, which this part, it doesn't really matter, just for testing keybinds. Initially, we can look at it. You can do your weaponry systems, remodify anything like that, and then save changes and equip, which is all fine. We're not too concerned about how we're setting it up or what we're using at this point. So I'm just going to leave it on the default Pisces, Anvil Pisces. We're going to go ahead and launch into this. Now, as it comes up, you'll see I'm automatically spawned into the ship, and I'm going to show you one of the greatest features about this as a whole right off the bat. I know. It looks like I'm going to collide. But boom, I messed up, which I'm sure you guys will frequently, but look at that respawn. It's only just a few seconds and I'm able to respawn. Let's roll that back. Can we believe that that'll happen again? Now I only have to hit X, and I'm playing keyboard and mouse here just for the beginners who haven't maybe bought into all the joysticks and all that kind of stuff. And then we'll look at some of these things. So here I am, I'm already back in the verse, and let's roll that back one more time. Will that happen 2 times in a row? Well, my ship bounced, but there it goes. It finally blew up. Then I got just a short 10-second respawn, and I'm right back in a ship. And this is important for you guys learning how to fly for the first time, because you may go into the regular persistent universe, and when you crash your ship, it takes a while to respawn. You don't have to deal with griefers and all that stuff. You're just really dealing with the pain that you create for yourself. So let's look around at this stuff. So now we've got our keybinds tested out. We can see how to roll. We can see how to increase our speed limiter. You can see me rolling my mouse on the right, and it is on the left, excuse me, of the screen. When I roll my mouse, it's giving me a limiter that allows me to go certain speed, or it tops out a certain speed. So that way I can more or less limit, like, oh, well, I'm overheating there. I might want to stay in the white zone or the pre-afterburner zone. I can also test out some decoupled flight mode, which is really important. So if I'm flying directly at this rock, I'm going to strafe due sideways, and you can see how it reacts. Somewhat sluggish, I would say, whereas if I were, and that was flying directly at the rock, afterburner, and strafing as hard as I can to the left. You can see my cursor indicating my strafe over there. And you can see it does, in fact, circle my target. I could potentially shoot it or whatnot. Whereas when I go to decoupled mode, which on your keyboard is default V, unless you've changed that around, Now let's see how that reacts a little different. Let me back away just a little bit and get that same perspective. Decoupled becomes a really important function in the game because it gives me a couple of advantages in a dogfight. Now I'm going to strafe up and over and strafe to the right or left. It actually keeps me oriented. It allows me to orient my ship in any direction without having any drag from the flight path that I'm taking. So if I'm to go, we'll look at this and show you exactly how decoupled works. And I think that's important to understand as well, as you got to understand all these keybinds and how they affect your flight as you get more and more advanced into your role. So we're going to recouple. We're going to fly right at this guy. We're going to leave it right around the top of it before it enters afterburner. And I'm going, oh crap, I'm in a hurry. I got to turn around. And you can see how the ship kind of moves a little sluggishly, and it eventually turns itself back around and makes that happen. Well, what you can also do, this is also a great braking technique to use, is let's accelerate directly at this. I'm going, oh no, I'm in trouble. I'm going to kick it out of coupled mode, and I'm able to spin my ship around. And I'm still coasting backwards at that full speed. I'm going to recouple and engage again. And now I've basically turned on a dime and more or less redirected my ship's thrust immediately the other way. So I got to use the bigger thrusters in the rear of the ship. As you can see, those things light up. You can see it has maneuvering thrusters as well, but the bigger thrusters in the rear of the ship, I got to use those to stop myself, as opposed to just using reverse or space brake or anything like that. By decoupling, I'll pull it from a third person view. I'm able to actually spin around in decoupled mode, recouple, and there we go. And I get to take off directly from that way. But some of the biggest things that I want you to pay attention to here is, remember, we were going through keybinds a bit, trying to figure out what to do. So here's where you go test those. You got those, possibly got the printout that I linked you over to from the wonderful folks providing those and keeping those updated for us. And, or not for us, but for anybody watching, anybody listening, anybody that clicks it, they've done a great job. But at the end of the day, like, I'm able to come in here and test all those things out. Do I know what roll means? Do I know, do I want to change my speed limiter down and see how it handles, or how my ship or different ships handle, not just the one I'm in right now, but I can cycle through all of my ships and kind of understand how they work. I understand what VTOL, landing gear, all that stuff does, and see how it affects on your screen. A lot of people are on your HUD. You've got some MFD panels, but I'm gonna focus really on the HUD right now and pay attention to what's going on here. So we've got our thrust, which is showing us, hey, when I hit on a keyboard, I hit W, it's gonna go straight up to 100% thrust, okay? And you can see it's falling backwards. Let's see. And what that means when it falls backwards, my finger has not left the W key, so I'm still fully accelerating directly forward. However, when I've achieved spaceflight and I'm at full speed, it doesn't require my engines to be on afterburner the full time. So you can see, even though I'm completely going forward as fast as I can, the thrusters are not lit up. So let's come to a stop and repeat that again. Use an X for space brake, and I'm going to accelerate, no afterburner or anything like that, just accelerate due forward. You can see my engines engage, and once it achieves speed or achieves my speed limiter, it stops thrusting, so it uses fuel more efficiently at that point, as you would expect from any type of space flight. So let's look at some of the other things here. Now, when I'm at 100% thrust, and let's put our speed limiter way up at the top so we can see a little bit more of this in action. At 100% thrust, that is just holding the W down on a keyboard or thrusting forward on a throttle. And I'm able to hit the shift key, and you can see that same thrust indicator over here goes up to 120. So it's basically that afterburner is telling me it's giving me another 20% boost. And you can see the AFB or afterburner indicator coming up right below the thrust measurement here, and see what you've got going on. Okay. So that's one thing you want to keep in mind, so you can keep and monitor your ship as you go forward. And we found the simulation boundary, which that's another important thing to know. When it says approaching simulation boundary, you're probably too late and you're about to blow up. But again, it's okay to mess up here, because it's just a simple 10-second or less wait, hit your X button on a keyboard, and you're right back in your ship. trying again. So really important to stop and go through Arena Commander, I think, as you're beginning. Let's go over some more key elements of the HUD. This is the newer style HUD, which you're probably not going to see right away, but it's due for a rework pretty soon, as the time of this video is June 25th of 2020. So there will be some updates since then, or probably by the time you're watching, if you wait a few weeks. So looking at this new style HUD, we talked about my speed limiter increase, which is a mouse wheel. However, we've also got, if you hold down right alt and you start adjusting, you can see that same thrust indicator that we were talking about before. So pay attention. There's this little demarcation right here to say that's the maximum thrust I can achieve, which we know default is at 100. Okay, we'll come down to stop again. And what I'm going to do is hold down right alt and then change my mouse wheel. And you can see that demarcation is moving around. So now when I thrust directly forward, guess what? I'm at a 59% maximum thrust. So it actually accelerates slower, which is a big thing as you get in the more finite movement of your ship, and maybe in landing situations, or you're mining or something like that, where you need much more precise movement. You might want to slow your ratio at which you thrust or you gain thrust for up or down. Okay. So next, and those are default keybinds, by the way. Next, we're going to see the velocities at meters per second. You can see it's pretty common. That one's easy to identify right here. That's showing you, hey, this is how fast I'm going. Am I accelerating? Am I going faster than I expect to go? You can see as you start getting into your top end right now, you are taxed some for that, and that's going to increase as they keep driving towards that realistic flight model. That is going to continue to grow in how effective that works with us, and how effective your ship flies at certain speeds. So I know there's a lot of push in the upcoming patch. Again, this is shot in June, so as the upcoming patch 3.10 comes out, the goal is to start mitigating some of the strength and effectiveness of your ship by how fast it's going. So combat might change pretty significantly on how fast your ship is actually traveling. So let's come back to a stop here and look at some of the other things. So velocity meters per second is important to keep an eye on. Your thrust ratio, like how far you are up and down to the top end. Those are important to know that, hey, I know I'm going 180, 200, 300 meters per second, but how much more juice do I have till I get to the top end? As you can see, we're up at the top end of this particular ship is going to be just under, I should say, 1,200 meters per second. So, there goes the simulation boundary again. Again, no negative effect here. This is just a goof around mode that we can play around with. So don't feel bad. Feel comfortable. Nice safe space. This is Vegas. As long as you're in the solo version, nobody's going to see your, you don't have anything to worry about. You're not going to embarrass yourself. You're not going to do anything. Just go blow yourself up as much as you want. Okay, so let's keep working our way through the HUD as this is respawning. And there's a couple other things. So this is one of the more important things. I'm going to try to get my view where you can see this as far as targeting, as we're working kind of left to right, top to bottom here. The center reticle, or this guy right here, is very important in the game and how it functions. When I push R, it gives me different reticle modes. The first section is going to be a free reticle. You can see that my guns are moving. My ship is not moving as aggressively, and I can even lock the orientation of my ship by pressing right shift, and then I can shoot my guns in all different directions, almost like a turret does, right? So I can get a lot of range out of that, depending on what kind of target I'm fighting. And it's important to know right shift will then unlock, and then I free up my guns, and they move. Basically, it gimbals your weapons somewhat independently, or much quicker, as you would expect. If you turn a gun, then turn your ship, the guns are going to turn first, right? And that's kind of what it does here, that the guns will lead yourself. So that's kind of your free look mode. I use this quite frequently if I'm just flying around, because it gives me a good understanding what the attitude of my ship is and which direction I'm actually facing and how fast I'm accelerating that way. Now, what will happen if you press R one time, it will lock that center reticle, which is tougher on keyboard mouse player because you don't know where dead center is. So I could be flying, say I'm doing some evasive maneuvering, and I let go of the keyboard, but I leave my mouse alone. I don't know that it's not on center other than my ship moving, and trying to get it back to center. After a while, you'll start to understand what it is, but it's hard to see. When I go back to that original mode, I do that same thing. I do some evasive maneuvering, and then I let go. I can see that, oh, I'm still way off to the one side. I can get myself centered back up for true and correct forward flight. So that's where I'm saying if I'm just flying around, maybe mining or taking a tour of something, landing, stuff like that, I like to go in this free mode on mouse and keyboard because it lets me understand what attitude or what direction my ship is pointing. So the third mode becomes really important. Well, and it's also, also the fixed mode is important because you know where your guns are firing all the time. They're always firing the direction your ship is pointing. So it's good, healthy manner to fly your ship so you're pointing the same direction you're firing. The next mode you'll see is still fixed, but you're going to see the dots pop up around your reticle. I'm going to try to point these out right here. This little dotted area around here is important because as you lock a target, okay, so you press the number 1 and it locks the target under your reticle, or the one that you're pointing at. You press 1, it'll lock that target. What happens is this is auto gimbal assist. As we can see, with going to third person, we're going to change back to that free look reticle. We're going to lock our orientation. We're going to spin around in this ship so you can see the gimbal in action. So here is, these are gimbling weapons, which that's a big thing in the game. Again, at the time of this taping, gimbal is way, and auto gimbal is way overpowered, but there's some adjustments coming to fixed firing, which we'll jump into in a bit, that allows the fixed firing to be a little bit better. And just as a rule, your gimbaled weapons are down one size from the normal weapons, with the unique exception of the size 1 weapons. Those will have a size 1 hard point, and when you gimbal them, they will still be a size 1 hard point. Anything beyond that, say if you have a size 2 hard point and you put a gimbal on there, it automatically sizes all your weapon classes down to a size 1. So you lose some power. There's some enhancements coming in 3.10 that are going to allow for fixed weapons to be a little bit cleaner. But before we get into the fixed weapons and the difference there, that's just to understand. I wanted to show you guys what the gimbling does. And then when you're using the aim assist, is probably the closest thing you can compare to it, is what people would normally call it. When I go into this dotted reticle mode, that is considered aim assist. So as I've got a locked target, it won't really make a difference in free mode like this, but when I have a locked target, it will help me by attacking that target directly or more accurately than I could do myself. Okay, so let's start across the bottom row. Let's see, what are we doing here to ourselves? You've got next your G-force, which is important, and also the other thing I was talking about when you go into the wild mode, right? We're gonna put our reticle back so you guys can see that, hey, I am going into some evasive maneuvering, and I come out of that evasive maneuvering. What's happening? Well, that G-force is telling me which direction those G's are coming from. So if I'm over to, I'm hard strafing left right now, and you can see this very small little attitude dot moves around where the G-forces are coming towards. So if you can imagine strafing hard to the left, you're being pressured. On the other side is where those G-forces are being generated. So that's what that little dot indicates, is where your thrust is coming from, that's creating those G-force of, at this point, 2.1 G-force. So you can see, is that important? Yes, it is, because here I'm going to thrust. We're going to get up there and do some really dastardly flying, and we're pulling almost 15 G's, just over 15 G's there. It's overheating. And now let's really throw some G's at this thing and start seeing what happens to us. As you see, I get up to 16 G's. I'm going to explode myself again. Whoa. Got a little bit too far on my evasive maneuvering there, but essentially what I'm going to try to simulate, might not have enough room. We'll try to create it or recreate that here. But essentially as your G's start getting up to a certain level, there are some enhancements coming that should make that a little bit more realistic, but you will see yourself start to black out and do some other things that are really, really bad for your health. As far as if you're in a fight or if you're in a critical moment, if you start blacking out, you can potentially lose control of your ship. You can lose control of the ability to see where you're going, just all kinds of things as those G's improve. There you go. So even though I'm not quite at 16 G's, you saw around 11 G's at a full hard turn, I was starting to get kind of a red vision, and that will continue to get worse. All right, so that is what your G-force segment of your HUD means. And then you can go to the next section. This tells you a few important things that people often overlook, especially if you're coming from an old flight model ship. Those are really hard to see. And what you can see right here is gear. What does that mean? When the circle is lit up, there we go. The circle is now lit up next to gear, and I'm indicating right here. See that little circle right there? That means my landing gear is down when I press the, here's my landing gear. On the bottom of the ship right here, you can see the 4 landing gear struts coming down. And when I go back to put the gear back up, you can see the circle goes away. I can go outside. You can see the landing gear is being picked up in my ship. So that's a good indication of where that is. And then you've got the coupled mode, which is right here. You can decouple your ship, and that's again where it's going to move more like a spaceship. This is the way I look at it. Like if you're in coupled mode, it's more like an airplane would fly. And if you're in uncoupled mode, it is more like a spaceship would fly. Now, the next component you might see on your HUD is the ESP, which is Enhanced Stick Precision. There we go. And we're able to actually manipulate that in the controls, but if you're flying mouse and keyboard, it won't matter too much to you. The next, you've got target or lock, target, and auto. And this is just essentially what I was talking about before by pressing the R, which is default keyed for your reticle focus. When you're on R, I call it position 2, but they have position 1. It's the locked reticle. You can see it lit up. When I press R again, it's got that auto gimbal with the dotted line around your main targeting reticle. And then when I press R again, it goes to the targeted mode where that's more what I call a free gimbal. Okay. So the next things you want to pay attention to that I missed on the first top down left to right is the thing over here in the very top left with the fire indicator up there is your shaft or your flares for countermeasures in case a missile is fired at you. That's just indicating how many you have. And then going back in order, we've got the fuel level for quantum is at 100. The fuel level for hydrogen is at 99, and that's a percentage mark. So different ships have different quantities and size fuel capacities and whatnot, but that's just a good indicator with what type of fuel you have and how much of it. So hydrogen I'm using here because it's basically flying around as you normally would. Quantum you would indicate if you actually do a quantum travel or hyperspace jump across the galaxy or star system. Okay, so that's basically your main HUD readout. You're going to see a few things that pop up here as you are looking through the different HUDs, but essentially if missiles are fired at you or you're locked, and then you'll see the lock warning, and then you'll see flames pop up across the shield, across the center of the HUD saying they fired 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, however many missiles at you. You'll see those pop up there. So those are just some ready up indicators. Now we'll get down to the MFDs, and there's some back and forth on this because these are all due for a restructure. So it's tough spending a lot of time, but just so you can get by and understand kind of what the MFDs are, because these are all often overlooked. There's a lot of controls here, and I felt like I was very overwhelmed initially when I started clicking around this, and I go, oh man, there's a lot. The keybinds don't satisfy everything. Do I need to know all this stuff? Well, some of it you do, some of it you need, some of it is helpful, and some of it you're just not going to use very frequently right now. Right now, just to start off at the top here on the general radar, there's some differences on how that appears. We don't have a target locked, or we don't have a destination locked right now, So it's not giving us any indicator, and we're in Arena Commander, so we don't have the ability to do that. But when I hold down F, and that's what I'm doing to free look around and be able to get my control cursor, and then I roll my mouse wheel in, and I can actually set the scale of the radar right here, and that's actually going to flip the perception around of which direction you're going to and coming from. You've got some set destinations, go to this location. The scale, radar scale, these things you can manipulate and get whatever's comfortable with you. Play around with it. Don't just assume it's going to be perfect every time, because they've adjusted some defaults from time to time that can be very frustrating to relearn how to look at and interpret the radar whenever those are changed. So make sure you're just aware of those. And now we'll look at the MFDs. There are some indicators right down here. You can see that power heat, power level, weapon heat, thruster heat, shield down, proximity warning. All these type of things are activate whenever those conditions arise. So those are warning lights that pop up, just indicators, not anything that you can really interact with. You can interact with these switches as they pop up with power off, your spool, quantum drive, shut engine off, turn it on. You've got, depending on the ship's capabilities, you've got exit, which will get me out of the seat. You might use those. I really recommend learning your keys. This will open exteriors, which you can see. I'll pop up out here. I use the manual key with the mouse, but I can also use hotkeys, which the letter K opens and closes your ships by default. So I would encourage you guys to learn the key maps. It might be helpful to get by, but it's really, really kind of a slow mechanism as it is right now to hold down F and move over and do other things in your ship. The things that you have to do that are very helpful to do is understand what these MFDs are and what they do. All of these, when they're working correctly, you can see I've got an MFD over here that's for comms to allow me to call up bases or whatnot as I'm landing and request landing. You've got one that's set up right now for power distribution, which again, if you look at that game glass, it has some ability to move that around on the game glass app itself without having to use this. So it's nice to be able to just pull your finger up and move it around. However, power distribution, does that change the power? No, it does. It redistributes the power differently. So I can move over to shields or systems. I can move down to shields or shields, and then systems, and then weapons. I can move power around as needed. If you've watched any space movies, you're like, move power to the forward shields. Well, you can move it to the shields, and then you can actually redo your power. Okay. So you've also got items, which I'm in the power menu here, and I'll show you what that means, but we'll come back. You can actually click these interactable items here and say, I want stealth mode, and that's going to take down the overall power of everything, so it's more stealthy. And I got to stop spinning or I'm gonna go crazy. Let me do a right shift lock so I don't accidentally move something. All right, so you've got some ability to adjust some of your powers. I think that's going to continue to increase the flexibility and how it's used. But you can go to the items on my power menu and decide, I can overclock things. Yes, you can. You can't overclock your coolers, but you can overclock your power. You can overclock your shields, your weapons, but you're going to be dealing with the punishment of that. So let's look at here. I've got just my power cell overclocked. And then I'm going to go over and let's overclock these two lasers. Or excuse me, all four of these lasers. And we're going to fire these all at one time. And you can see from an overclock perspective, you can see those things lighting up over there in the left. And my weapons are overheated. That's kind of the pain for overclocking, where I can take the overclock off. You actually are going to deal with heat overcharges, because that's the one thing you can't overclock is your coolers, and this is going to allow for me to fire for a longer period of time with less power, granted, but it'll allow me to fire for longer period of time that way. So you got to figure out how you're going to use them. What weapons you use make a big difference there. But just so you know, there is the ability to overclock. Now, when you're getting into stealth that I talked about, maybe we want to go really stealthy, and let's figure out how we see that. Let's look at some of the other menus here. So I'm going to go menu, and I'm going to look at this heat that's being produced. Well, there you go. My MFD failed. So anytime I have an MFD fail, again, the long the long series of workarounds that you get with Star Citizen, just be aware of those. I'm going to jump out and back into my pilot seat, which basically resets the UI. And let's see if that works for us now. We're going to grab, dun, 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 while it resets here, we're going to try to jump out and back in, reset the UI, and see if that gives me the ability to change my HUD display or my MFD display. Power. Okay, now it changed to power, and let's look at heat. There we go. Okay. So now you can start to see, as stealth mechanics become more and more of a thing, you can see my general heat distribution that's putting out right now. We've got EM emissions for 4563, IR emissions at 7794, and heat emissions at 279. Now, when I go back to these power things, this is where things become important. That I've got, let's say my coolers that let's start with the repeaters. Let's back out so you can see this. There's my basic values, and I'm going to I'm going to power off all 4 of my guns. So now they're not sitting. Ooh, I might have turned off the shield too. Let me get the other gun and not the shield, and we'll leave the shield on for right now. Now, here we go. We're seeing some base values drop, but I'm not actually firing my guns. Now, can I fire my guns? No, I cannot, because they're powered off. So this sometimes causes some errors. But now that they've powered off, they've gotten it ready. I'm right back up to emitting heat and IR signatures because guns are not being fired all the time. This game is going for that ultra real mode, but shields are on. You can see right here, and I'll explain that in a minute, but these are shield indicators that are 100%. We're going to turn those shields off and see if we can drop that signature down some, because those are persistently on. So, well, we turned off thrusters too. All right, so we've got there's only one shield. So we turned one of those off. We also turned our quantum off. And now you're starting to see the EM signature drop, the heat signature is dropping a bit. But look over here, I've got no shields. Now let's keep on going down. If I'm wanting to hide in a rock like they did in Star Wars multiple times to hide from enemies coming after them, or whatever your particular choices and shows, I'm going to de-overclock my power supply, and then I'm going to go back over here, not just not overclock it, but I'm going to shut the power of it off. And guess what happens to my ship? No, that's a great place to hide, because what do you think my heat signature is doing? It's fantastic right now, right? So now what happens? I'm screwed. Oh no, I cannot turn my ship back on. Yes, I can. I can push U. I can do these things and flip that same toggle back on along with the power off down here. U powers your ship up, but let's go back. So I've got my coolers. I'm going to turn those off. I'm going to turn my guns off, and I'm going to turn my, let's see, let's get all the power off. Let's get all the shields off, and let's turn some thrusters off. And as you can see, like, look at my, ooh, I left my stuff off again. So as I started powering all those things off, right, you saw my heat signature drop down, 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 which that's a good thing. If you're hiding at the time that it becomes really important for you to do the stealth mode, it's important to know that that exists. So let's move on to some of the other MFD panels real quick as I get in, out. Let's ready up the ship for flight again, and let's power everything back up so you can kind of get an idea what that does and how you can manipulate and change power readings, all that type of stuff, right? It's pretty important that you know how that stuff works. And let's see. We've got this. All right, we might have had a little game crash there. No worries. Okay, so we're back in looking at the MFDs. As we looked at, here is your power distribution. You're able to handle some of this stuff. And then let's look at the different menus, because all these should be selectable. So I showed you the comms. That's going to be important for calling up your biggest things that you're going to use this for, calling up for a landing as you approach a landing service, or you get within 10,000 meters or 10 kilometers away from a port to land in. You're going to see that option to come up, and you will have a Wi-Fi signal or the communication signal up here. You can click on it, will radio in and request landing for you. All right, so heat, we looked at that briefly. We can see basically what our EM, our IR emissions are and our overall heat emissions. We can then, again, power these things off to help ourselves out with cooling that off as well as within the power menu. Okay, so the next thing you're going to go to is self-status, which we've already got pulled on, but this is basically telling you, hey, where are my shields at right now? And where are they dispersed? Okay, let me get myself from free flying around again. We're going to throw our right shift on so we're not coasting, just to not be distracted. But you can see up here, I can see that my shields are basically 25% distributed to each side, but I can press this button right here and I get a different view. I can get a better look and see what's going on. I can go back to the top view. I can go to the bottom view, and then I can get a free spinning view of returning back to my last view. So this is important because you might want to redistribute your shields, but that way you understand your self status, which it may be important to you to understand that as you're in a fight and you want to know how bad your shields are getting hit. So I can then go to shields, actually the menu, to see if I've got to, and just back up for 1 second, self status. This will also show damage to your ship as you take it. Let's go try to create just a very little bit of damage to our ship, or a catastrophic damage. That's totally possible too. We're going to just try to nudge it. As you see that self status, I've got the same window replicated right there, so we'll be able to see it as it occurs. I'm going to fly up and try to bounce a little bit off of this rock, and you'll see what damage is indicated to your ship whenever you happen to bump into something or you get shot. There you go. See that red flashing light? That tells me I got some hit on the hull of my ship, but it wasn't catastrophic, so it's not even marked as red. We're going to keep banging our ship around. You can see I've got a little bit of red marker right there now that I didn't have before. That is telling me that, hey, I've actually sustained some damage to it. Oh, I sustained too much damage that time. Blew myself up. But there you go. That's just an indicator of what, as you're in a fight, whether it be with other players or PvE, you can see, hey, did I sustain much damage, or what happened when I bounced off that asteroid or that landing pad or another ship, or I got shot. You can see that right there. Okay, so let's go on to the next menu item, and we're going to look at shields, because there's a few things here you want to know. This is telling you, hey, this is what shields I have. But mainly right here, I have on my number keypad, it is default setup, and it's a little easier to manage this in Game Glass. If you remember the tutorial, as we're looking at the combat mode, you can actually click the distribution and change your shield distribution, but that's also keyed into my number pad. I can press the number 6 on my number pad, and look, it automatically shifts the percentage to heavy up the side shield. I can press the forward pad, and then it moves some of that distribution to the front shield, and then go around and basically level the shields back out again at 100 and say, look, I'm fighting somebody head forward over and over again. I can click forward, and there we go. Boom. I've got heavier shields up front. If it's even more, I can put more shields up front. So this is just a readout to where your shield power is distributed. So you know if you accidentally hit that, or if you intentionally hit it, you'll know what status it's in with your front, left, right, and back shields. Okay, so another thing to keep in mind about shields, and this is one of those min-maxing things. What other control panel is what I'm really focused on here, is what's called shield hardening. You're going to see that number, and that's going to come up more and more as you play the game, and you get more and more into the weeds on how this stuff works. Say I'm fighting a ship that's constantly hitting me from the front, and it's really more overpowered than I am. So I go, my first thing, I might beef up my shields, right? I clicked it forward twice, so I've got 200% of the shields forward, taking more or less 33% from each of the other ones to get myself heavied up on the front. Well, now what I can also do is click this button right here, and when I click it, you'll start to see it blink, and that means it's hardened those shields, and it depends on the type of shield I have, how much it's hardened. But now I've hardened a 200 capacity shield, and say it's got a 50% hardening factor. Now I've got like a 300 capacity shield on the front and I'm really beefy, but you can see it getting smaller. It's ticking down. That means the shield hardening is dissipating, and you're going to see it go all the way down to 0. And once it goes down to 0, it starts blinking red, and that says I'm no longer hardened. It is now in recharge mode. So it's taking equally as long on this particular shield to recharge as it did for me to expend it. So I'm not able to harden another shield. I'm not able to do anything until that recharge goes through, and we'll watch it go through as we're flying around a little bit. And we're still at 200% capacity because we've moved our shield power to the forward, but now it's recharged and it's ready to go again. So I can either harden one of these shields immediately, or I can click this guy again, and guess what? It's ready. It's hardened again. We're back up at potentially 300 shield hardening, depending on the factor of the shield. Okay, so there we go. I can also power that off and on right there, put it on standby, whatever. All right, so there's your shields. And then the next one we all love to look at is weapons. So what do I have? This is important to know because let's watch. I'm firing mouse button 1, our weapon group 1. Now I'm firing mouse button 2, our weapon group 2, depending on what kind of system you're using. But what happens if I want to fire them all at the same time? I have to hold down both buttons, maybe, or maybe I want mouse button 1 to fire these. I can switch these designations right here by pressing gun, our guns right here. And I can say, okay, well, these 2 weapons are on assignment 0, which is mouse button 1. I can put all of them on mouse button 0. So then all 4 of them fire at the same time. Okay. Or I can inversely add these. So I've got 2 different guns. So now it's just the left side firing and the right button is the right button set firing. So you can assign those however you want. It's important just to know that because it might make it easier for you to fight if you get all the same weapons, same class of weapons, type of weapons on all of your hard points. It might be easier for you to fire them all with one trigger. It certainly is for me. Missiles, it will tell me what I have, how many missiles do I have, if they're available. Change my priority, whether I want, those will continue to improve on how that works and targeting subsystems and things like that. And we'll go over that later. That's getting pretty in depth, but I can turn my missiles on and off. As I said yesterday, I keybind into the period and comma on a keyboard flight. And just that's up to you. You play around with that as far as missiles go. So simple look at the weapons. I can turn them off and on, which I might not want to turn my weapons off ever, but you might have to do it if you want to run cool for a minute. Then we've got, last but not least, we've got the target status right down here. I can click this, and as I get a target, it's going to give me a readout that's very, very similar to self-status readout for the target. So I'll be able to see, if I'm damaging their shields, if I'm hitting their hull, I can see what's going on when I'm actually firing at the target. Not only will I have a hit marker on the screen, but I will start to see if there's the target is being affected by my hits and how. So there you go. That's a quick overview of the HUD. We're going to let's go back to pull out an older style ship, and I'll show you the quick overview of what those look like. However, I think it's going to be not useful in a very short time because I think they're going to redo all of the ships. That they're all going to be on a similar HUD very soon. I might have to redo this, but understanding like where these components are critical for monitoring purposes, some for access, as you can see. For the most part, I would say between game glass and your keybinds, as you learn those and get more efficient with them, you're going to use those way more than you're going to use going down and touching MFD panels or moving yourself around. That gets time consumptive and not really a smooth feel or gameplay with as you get more advanced into the game, right? It's going to be more difficult to reach down and touch something with your mouse than it is today with using your hotkeys. hopefully we get some improvements on that. But here we go. We are in a Hornet, which is one of the more popular fighters in the game, but it's going to deal with the more classic style HUD that you can see. The MFDs don't change, but you can see the HUD itself does change. And a few things that you want to keep in mind are the locations of where those are. So again, you've got your top speed limiter with your mouse roll on the left going up and down. This one has your total acceleration. Let me put myself on shift lock so I'm not drifting all over. But this one has your acceleration limiter over here, not your speed limiter, but your acceleration limiter. I can hold down right alt and move that up and down. Okay. And then I've got the fuel for, and this is only hydrogen. In this type of HUD, you really have to hit F2, which it won't work in this mode, but you have to hit F2 to be able to get to understand your quantum fuel levels. It's just not included. Important thing to note. Also, here's my countermeasures, which this ship has them. So I've got 24 available. I'm traveling at 0 Gs. That's my G meter. Then I've got whether I'm in afterburn or not right down here on the bottom. So it's a little bit different because it's not as incapacitating. When I put down my, decoupled, as I talked about, when I press decoupled, you can see right here a little broken paper clip or a broken circuit shows up to say, oh, I'm no longer coupled. Keep that in mind. And then I can recouple. I put landing gear. Well, there's my spool. I didn't mean to spool in quantum. Getting shot at because I'm drifting around. I joined Vandal Swarm instead of the standard free flight mode. Okay, so then I can hit landing gear down. You can see it has this symbol as opposed to the dot that's filling in or not. And then you've got VTOL, which this one doesn't have VTOLs. There's an indicator as well for VTOL to let you know that your VTOL is up or down. So just a little bit different HUD. Keep that in mind. It's telling me it's less information. I don't think it's as good. That's why they're moving away from that pretty quick. But just so you know, there's some components on here that are not available, that are available on the other HUD that you might want to keep in mind. Oh, there's a great thing. They did shoot me, so you can see I've got some damage being reported right there with the bright red on that self status I was talking about. But these MFDs are located at different places, so it doesn't mean that they're not, the functions are not there. It does mean that, oh, and I get to see my targeting reticle now. Let's go to auto. Oh, I don't have auto gimbals. Okay. I boo-booed that up. All right. So, and again, there's a good example of I accidentally went into that. Really didn't want to go for demonstration purposes, but you can see I'm respawned right again. I'm ready to fight. Once I get my key maps sorted out and I know what I want to do, I can get right in and start to fight some of these NPCs with or without teammates to really get the feel for what combat looks like in space. But that's what we've got right now. If you've got any questions, please leave them in the comments below. I'll try to cover as much as I can for you guys and help you guys out with how to be effective as a pilot or anything else in the game. I think there's so much that needs to, there's so much that you have to learn. I'm going to try to step through this as slow as I can. So some of this might be redundant for you. Some of it may pose some more questions. Don't hesitate to ask. Just shout me out a question in the comments below, and I'll be glad to address those as soon as possible. Thank you so much. And for now, this is Dragon X signing out, and fly safe and be safe out in the verse. See you around.